This is Chewbacca the Wookiee Pug. She means business. I opened today's lecture with a quote from Sarah Manguso. The best thing about time passing is the privilege of running out of it, of watching the wave of mortality break over me and everyone I know. No more time, no more potential. The privilege of ruling things out, finishing, knowing I'm finished. And knowing this time will go on without me. Look at me, dancing my little dance for a few moments against the background of eternity. So we're going to talk today about beginnings. Even though that doesn't seem like a meditation on a beginning, to me, every great beginning seems to convey that kind of, that sort of sense of time dwindling, that sense of our lives sort of slipping through and becoming shorter. A great entrance to a short story brings us into an experience where things are at stake, where things are afloat. Flannery O'Connor is a good man is hard to find is a great example. That story sort of brings us into this family discussion, not when they're planning their vacation, but when the grandmother, right before they're about to go on the vacation, and the grandmother is trying to convince her son to go to Tennessee, right? She doesn't want to go to Florida. That's when the story begins. That's when the grandmother's life becomes an interesting life, when she lets her sense of nostalgia overtake her son's vacation. Sarah Manguso also says something that is maybe good for us to keep in mind, and that's that there really are no beginnings. Things are happening before they even sort of appear to happen. Our lives are set in motion often before we are even born. Life we can easily get hung up on beginnings and endings, and yet really things are what she sort of says is ongoing. Things are ongoing. So I wanted to talk about about some principles of what maybe makes a great story beginning. And these principles or qualities are really on display much more in the short story form than they are in the novel form. There's just not a lot of time to waste in a short story. And so the form is like a really beautifully chiseled spear in every way. Great short stories often begin in the middle. Playwrights call this in media res. And this just means that they begin after the action has sort of started, after things have begun to heat up. They sort of begin in the middle. They place the reader in the middle of a conflict as the conflict is already unfolding. So that we often, as readers, feel that sort of ghost, that sort of whatever action precedes the story's entrance. We feel sort of ghost looming there. It's wonderful. A short story's entrance or a beginning, it establishes, first and foremost, it establishes the point of view. Is it a first-person story? Is it a third-person story? And if it's a third-person story, whose consciousness does the point of view inhabit? Who is the character who has sort of everything to lose in this story? Is it the narrator the character who's telling the story, or is it a point of view character? It's very important that we, as readers, come to notice right off the bat, what is the story's point of view? Where's the center of the story? A great entrance begins to develop both the inner conflict of the protagonist, either the narrator or the point of view character, and then it also begins to set in motion the conflict between the characters, the external conflict. For example, in the story Loyalty, that opening right away, the narrator has immediately blames Astrid for everything that is happening to him, and we see his sense of humor come out. We sort of see we see the external conflict between the sort of triangle between Astrid and Corinne and the narrator. The beginning of a story it usually does, point to a story's occasion. What is the occasion of a story? It just means, what is the event or the experience that has set this story into motion? In the case of Loyalty, that is Corinne's calling up the narrator and saying that she needs him to, not calling up, but she's written him a postcard, and she needs him to pick him up at the bus station, right? She's invading his family. She's coming back. She's returning. That is the situation or the occasion of that story. A beginning may or may not offer us a glimpse into the story's occasion. Actually, in the case of Loyalty, that short story, the narrator talks quite a bit about Astrid and Corinne and the sort of his marriages before we get to the news that Corinne has returned. Often a beginning introduces the reader to a central metaphor, to a sort of image that might be recurring, and it sort of begins to build this sort of metaphorical apparatus of the short story. If the story is written in first person, the story will introduce us to qualities of the narrator's voice, whether the narrator is sarcastic, as is the case in the short story Loyalty, whether there's another quality, another sort of really important quality of the narrator's voice, might be kindness or generosity or a sense of wonder. So if you're talking about a first-person story, that opening of the story can be very important in introducing us to sort of mix of qualities of voice. And voice reveals character and character complexity, which is why that's important. Okay, these are my little notes on story beginnings. Enjoy.